with all of that. But I do want to say this, Chris. I think sometimes you have to watch me. I have a tendency to have a thought, and then I see a squirrel and I chase after it.
Oh,
So
me
I'm
too.
gonna kind of bring us back just a tidge because I mentioned that I mentioned cherry picking, like
Yes.
finding the scriptures that condemn or that say divorce really isn't the ideal plan. But honestly, we already knew that.
Right.
We already knew it wasn't ideal
Because we always
after
say till
Genesis
death
3.
do us part. Both times I said it.
Correct.
Everybody's still alive, and we're not
Correct.
together anymore. So,
But there's a bigger picture of Jesus than just this clarification that he gives on the way that the people in that community are handling divorce. There's a bigger picture of Jesus. And so if you look at John chapter 8 verses 1 through 11, and I'm just going to kind of give you the gist of the story, but read it, folks, because it's awesome. It's like I really believe it's one of my favorite stories in scripture. And so Jesus encounters, there is a woman who's caught. You ever heard the term red-handed?
yes.
Okay. So there is a woman who is caught red-handed in the act of adultery. Like, it's not debatable. Is she guilty? Is she an adulteress? Is she not? And she's caught in the act, and Jesus is there in that moment. And in that moment, they're getting ready to stone her, to put her to
Right.
death.
I'm familiar.
Yeah, that is the punishment for
This is one of my favorite stories.
for a man and a woman caught in the act of
Right.
adultery. Of course, in the story, they're silent about the man. Apparently, he gets to go back to
Of
whatever
course.
he's doing. And so the woman is being held accountable for this act of adultery. And Jesus, he invites all the people standing around, let you who are without sin, like if you haven't done anything wrong, then you go first.
You cast the first stone.
Cast the first stone. Throw the first stone.
Zero
at this
people
woman.
cast a stone.
That's right. And so here is Jesus, and I know that we read earlier about his kind of concern. Well, his concern about divorce and adultery and how that can all not be the ideal plan for people. But then we go to this story where there's a woman caught in adultery, and in that place that where Jesus meets her, in this place that, I mean, she has to be disheartened. She has to feel like her whole world is ending because, in all honesty, by society, it's supposed to.
Right.
She's blown it in the community's eyes. But Jesus reminds everybody, going back to that Romans 3:23, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. And guess how many people throw a stone at her, Chris?
Zero.
None. Jesus starts writing in the sand, looking away so that people can go ahead and just lambaste her. Just throw stones at this woman. If you are sin-free, if you have not done anything, you go ahead. And he looks up then, and there's nobody left standing there. Like, they all put their stones down, and they turn, and they go away. And, I mean, isn't that just the most beautiful picture of who Jesus is? In the place where we feel like all is lost, like we've just done too many things wrong, we've been caught doing something that's less than ideal, and yet Jesus is still right there with us. And no, he doesn't want us to maybe stay in this place of feeling broken. He wants us to have a way forward. He wants us to go and make good choices going forward. But he doesn't abandon us. He was right there the whole time. Right there by her side the whole time. Right. This woman who was, in the eyes of the community, as big a sinner as it gets. Crime equals death. Punishment equals death. And he's standing right there with her the whole time. And in fact, after he looks up, he's like, well, where are all your accusers? Like, where is everybody? She's like, they've all gone. And he said, nobody condemns you? And she said, no. And he says, well, neither do I. Now, Chris, if Jesus does not condemn her, if he doesn't condemn someone who is walking in this brokenness, then who are we to condemn? As individuals, as a church? Like, that is not our place or position. I mean, if Jesus can stick it out with people in their brokenness, whether it's adultery or divorce or whatever you want to label it, then that's what we're supposed to do. And that's what the church is supposed to do. And that's why it hurts my heart to think about your mom and your stepdad as they'd moved forward. They were living a life that was trying to be faithful to this new covenant relationship. And in the midst of their trying to move forward, in the midst of Jesus with them, they are told that there's still something wrong with them or they're not enough.
You know, the whole irony of that story is that pastor and his wife divorced.
Oh, yeah. And that's, it's heartbreaking.
And I think he was just following the rules of the church.
Sure. I think we get caught up a lot of times following rules of the church. And, I'm a rule follower from way back. Let me tell you,
I'm a rule breaker from way back.
Oh, good gravy. Listen, I have always been a rule follower. This is the joke that I hope my sister will forgive me for. But, when I grew up, I was always like, whatever the rule is, follow the rule. And she was kind of like, it's easier to get forgiveness than permission. And she was a lot braver than I was in life growing up, and but anyway, I just followed the rules. So I'm not saying rules aren't meant to be followed, but I am saying that there are times we don't get it right.
Sometimes we need to challenge them a little bit, maybe.
And
not break them, but challenge them, question them.
Well,
I don't
absolutely, know. Chris. I don't think you're wrong. I think there's a lot to be said for that statement. Is that I do think sometimes we just believe what we've been told, or we believe this cherry picking system of here's 5 verses that support what I want to say.
Right.
And so we don't dig deeper to see, we want to say, well, Jesus said, and that's well and good. But you know what? We also say in our universe that actions speak louder than words.
Actions speak louder than words.
Well, what were his actions? His actions and his words were totally in sync about neither do I condemn you, to the woman caught in adultery, red-handed, if you will. So I would just say that there is more to Jesus about how he has compassion and how he has grace and how he has mercy on all of us. And that if we want to really live lives that reflect him, if we want to be his followers, then we need to be, I think, more in sync with his words and his actions.
Right.
And so for those of us that have experienced divorce, I do believe wholeheartedly that healing and restoration are possible.
Yes. Prayer, time.
Yes.
I think time sometimes.
Time helps. I think when we know that we don't have to carry the burden by ourselves, because we can end up in a pretty dark place just because we are carrying such a load. Sometimes we're embarrassed. I think
the embarrassment and humiliation. I wasn't woman enough. I wasn't man enough.
Yep. I absolutely felt like I had failed. And listen, for those folks that know me, they know that I really like to get, I don't want a 99 on the test. I want a 100.
Right.
It's a sickness that I have to deal with. I'm trying to recover. But if you're the type of person that really, really cares about giving your best and doing your best, it can really bring you to a place of feeling like you have failed.
Right.
And that's I think the enemy talking to us, because he's the accuser. So he's going to accuse us of being a failure. He's going to accuse us of not being worthy. But then we've really got to remember that that's not what God says about us
Right.
at all. And so I wanted to share with you a psalm, Psalm 147:3, and this is what the psalm tells us. He heals the brokenhearted, and he binds up their wounds. So my hope, Chris, is that individually and as a church, as a faith community, as followers of Christ, that we could be a place of support and healing, that we could help offer counseling. Like you said, go talk to somebody. There is someone here that will sit with you and listen, and support groups, and just giving people a community of love. Like, I think that's the witness that we're called to be in this community, so that people can see the bigger picture of who Jesus is, and all that he said, and all that he's done. Let's see, I was going to just, I think John Wesley said that we should be rigorous in judging ourselves and gracious in judging others. And I think often we get that backwards.
Right.
I think
Who's this John Wesley character guy you're talking about?
So John Wesley, I'm a little bit of a Wesley nerd. Let's just be honest.
I need to do more research. I know who he is, but there's some of our listeners that may not.
Sure. Okay. So John Wesley, and the truth is, he and his brother Charles, way back in the day, in the 1700s, they began to, they were so diligent in wanting to grow in holiness, to learn more about God. And so they began to, have all these practices that they put in place, and it had lots of names that people gave it. But that eventually, that way, that method of gathering grew into being called the Methodist.
So John Wesley and Charles, they developed and originated the Methodist Church.
So they are folks that really, and they weren't trying to do that, by the way. They were still very loyal to the Church of England.
Right.
But they created these societies and clubs, and so over time, it did become this Methodist movement.
Okay.
And it grew like wildfire in England, in America, and so that is actually where we would attribute our roots as Methodist. And so anyway, so I'm a little bit of a Wesley nerd. I don't think you have to agree with every single thing in every single way that somebody says something or does something to still see a lot of value in the way that they put their whole self into trying to figure it out better. Like, I have a lot of respect for his trying to figure out how to be a follower of Jesus and how to witness to the world what that looked like in what he said and what he did. Wesley was known for being more vile, and he wrote that in his in his personal diaries or records. And you know what he said that about? This is hilarious. This is a freebie. This is not on divorce. This is a freebie. But so he wrote in his journal that he submitted to be more vile. And what he was doing was he was going outside the church. Instead of the reverent, put on the garments and everybody come and sit in church, he went out in the fields where the people were that weren't able to come into the church.
Right. Okay. And
he preached to people where they were. And in that day, that was being extreme.
I bet.
So he said, more vile, to go and preach in the fields to people. So anyway, I'm not gonna keep going on with all the Wesley stuff, although I have to get me a button that says Wesley nerd. And just remembering though that